Hi guys, I'm just recording this video for Mrs. Gleason's social studies reading and questions. This is on our assisted studies classroom. We have posted World War II questions and World War II readings. What I've done here is I've opened them up into two different tabs, and I'm going to go through them with you. So over here is our guiding reading questions. You should have a physical handout of this that you'll be completing over class. I'm going to go through these questions so that when we go through the reading, we can have a better understanding of what we're looking for. So the first thing to keep in mind is at the bottom here, she has our 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 vocabulary terms. So these would be pretty easy to find just by skimming through here. So we could go through and look for, oh there, fascism. So we're looking for bold underline words. We can take this definition here, fascism. Mussolini began a political movement known as fascism. Fascism preached an extreme form of patriotism and nationalism that was often linked to racism. Okay, so we could copy this definition over here, put it into our own words over here. So this is the vocabulary words. For the questions, we have several sections. We have the rise of the dictators, Mussolini, Hitler, and Stalin. And then we have a section for each of the dictators. Dictators seek to expand territory. We have several questions here. Appeasement at Munich. We have several questions here. Germany starts the war. Several questions here. Germany attacks the Soviet Union. And then just our vocabulary terms. Okay, so we'll go back to our reading here. We're going to skip over this voice from the past and go at the rise of the dictators. So we've got rise of the dictators, rise of the dictators. We're looking for these three questions in this reading. So we've got, by the mid-1930s, dictators or absolute rulers had seized control in several countries: Italy, Germany, Japan, and the Soviet Union. Their rise to power was due to economic and political factors that dated back to the end of World War I. So right off the bat, we have dictators or absolute rulers, something we could use to answer this question. The treaties that ended the war had left many nations feeling betrayed. Japan and Italy, for example, had helped to win the war. However, both were dissatisfied by the peace treaties. Italy gained less territory than it wanted. Japan felt ignored by the European powers of the losing countries. Germany was treated the most severely. The winning stripped Germany of more than 10% of its territory and all of its overseas colonies. The winners also forced Germany to disarm, and they made Germany pay for the war damages and accept responsibilities for the war. Meanwhile, in World War I had left the economies of Europe in ruin. Both sides emerged from the war heavily in debt. There was some economic growth in the 1920s, but the world economic situation collapsed with the Great Depression of the 1930s, and we just learned about the Great Depression of the 1930s. Mass unemployment caused widespread unrest. Many Europeans turned to new leaders to solve these problems. So we have, back over here, which countries had dictators in the 1930s? Dictators had seized control of several countries. We've got the countries here. Which countries were most upset about the peace treaties after World War II? And we've got here, many nations felt betrayed, and we've got some countries listed. So, Mussolini, Hitler, and Stalin. Mussolini, Hitler, and Stalin. One new leader was Benito Mussolini of Italy. Shortly after World War I, Mussolini began a political movement known as fascism. Fascism preached an extreme form of patriotism and nationalism that was often linked to racism. They oppressed people who did not share their views. In 1922, Mussolini became Prime Minister of Italy. In 1925, he established a dictatorship and took the title Il Duce, the leader. In Germany, Adolf Hitler led the fascist National Socialist German Workers' Party, or the Nazi Party. Although throughout the early 1930s, the Nazis gained power by preaching German racial superiority. They also promised to avenge the nation's defeat in World War I. In 1933, the Nazis won control of the government. Hitler then overthrew the Constitution. He called himself Der Führer, or the leader. We've got Adolf Hitler, Nazi Party. What country become leader of? What did the Nazi Party believe? So these are questions right up here. In the Soviet Union, the communists tightened their grip of power during the 1920s and 1930s. V.I. Lenin, who led the communist takeover of Russia in 1917, died in 1924. His successor was Joseph Stalin. Under Stalin, the government tried to control every aspect of life in the nation. It crushed any form of opposition. So Joseph Stalin, what country become the leader of? Got Joseph Stalin right here. Okay, dictators seek to expand territory. We're looking for while dictators were gaining power in Europe, the blank was increasing power in Japan. Okay, so while dictators were gaining power in Europe, the military was increasing power in Japan. In 1931, the Japanese military pushed the island nation to grab more land and resources. That year, the Japanese attacked Manchuria, a province in northern China rich in natural resources. They conquered the region within months. Both Italy and Germany also sought new territory. In 1935, Italy attacked Ethiopia, one of the few independent African nations. Italian troops roared in with machine guns, tanks, and airplanes. By the spring of 1936, Ile-Duce had his first conquest. That same year, Hitler moved troops into Rhineland, a region of Germany along the French border. Under the Treaty of Versailles, the Rhineland was supposed to remain free of German forces. The French government was outraged by the treaty violation. However, it took no action, nor did the League of Nations. So we've got Hitler moving into the Rhineland here. In 1936, Hitler and Mussolini formed an alliance known as the Rome-Berlin Axis. So the Axis was one of the colors we were doing when we were labeling our countries on Friday. After this treaty, Germany, Italy, and their allies became known as the Axis. That year, a civil war erupted in Spain. The conflict pitted Spain's fascist-style military against the country's elected government. Hitler and Mussolini supplied the fascist forces with troops, weapons, and aircraft. In April 1939, Spain's army declared victory over the government and established a dictatorship. In 1939, Hitler invaded Austria, home to mostly German-speaking peoples. He insisted that the Austrians wanted to be part of Germany. Many residents of Austrian Germany welcomed the unification. Appeasement in Munich. So all of those questions should have been answered above. So I've got appeasement in Munich. It's going to be all these questions. So after taking over Austria, Hitler set his sights on the Sudetenland. I don't know how to pronounce that word, I'm sorry. This was a region in Czechoslovakia where many people of German descent lived. Czechoslovakia, though, did not want to give up the region. France and Russia pledged their support to Czechoslovakia. If Germany attacked, suddenly Europe teetered on the brink of another war. Britain's Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain stepped in. He met with Hitler in an attempt to calm the situation, but their talks made little progress. On September 29, 1939, Hitler and Chamberlain met in Munich, Germany. By the next day, the two sides had made a major breakthrough and signed an agreement. Germany gained control of the Sudetenland. In return, Hitler promised to stop seeking any more territory. The Munich Agreement was an example of the British and French policy known as appeasement. So appeasement was one of our words down there. Under this policy, they met Germany's demands in order to avoid war. Chamberlain returned home from Munich and triumphantly announced that he had achieved peace in our time. Others, however, disagreed with appeasement. Winston Churchill reportedly wrote of the agreement, Britain and France had to choose between war and shame. They chose shame. They will get war too. So that's a pretty aggressive thing to say there. Hitler soon Germany starts the war. So we've got the last section here. Germany starts the war, or not the last, second to last. Germany starts the war. Hitler soon broke the promise he had made in Munich. In March 1939, his troops moved in and conquered the rest of Czechoslovakia. The Führer then declared his intent to seize territory from Poland. Britain and France warned that an attack on Poland would mean war. Britain and France assumed they had an ally in Stalin. After all, the Soviet Union and the government and Germany were bitter enemies. However, in August 1939, Germany and the Soviet Union signed a non-aggressive pact. In it, they agreed not to declare war on each other. On September 1, 1939, Germany invaded Poland. Great Britain and France declared war on Germany 2 days after the invasion of Poland. World War II had begun. The Germans introduced a new method of warfare known as Blitzkrieg, or lightning war. It stressed speed and surprise and the use of tanks, troops, and planes. German forces drove deep into Poland. As Germany conquered Western Poland, the Soviet Union invaded from the east. In less than a month, Poland fell to invading enemies. In April 1940, Hitler conquered Denmark and overran Norway. A month later, Germany launched a blitzkrieg against Belgium, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands. British and French troops could do little to stop advancing Germans. As each nation surrendered, British soldiers retreated to the French seaport of Dunkirk on the English Channel. Under heavy German bombardment, British vessels evacuated nearly 340,000 British, French, and Belgian troops. In June 1940, the Germans launched a major offensive against France. In less than 2 weeks, they reached Paris. Days later, France surrendered. Hitler believed that Great Britain would seek peace after France fell. Even though France had fallen, the British had no intention of quitting. Churchill, the new British Prime Minister, declared, "We shall defend every village, every town, and every city." Hitler soon made plans to invade Britain. To do so, however, he needed to destroy Britain's Royal Air Force, often called RAF. In the summer of 1940, the German Air Force, or Luftwaffe, and the RAF fought in the skies over Britain. German planes also unleashed massive bombing attacks on London and other civilian targets. By September, however, the Battle of Britain had left Hitler frustrated. The RAF was holding off the Luftwaffe, and despite constant bombing, the British people did not surrender. So the last section, we've got German attacks on the Soviet Union. So we've got, while Hitler's forces conquered Western Europe, Stalin's troops invaded Finland in November of 1939. The Soviets then seized the country of Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania along the Baltic Sea. Despite their partnership, Hitler and Stalin distrusted each other. Hitler feared Soviets' ambition in Europe. He also wanted Soviet wheat and oil fields. As a result, Hitler invaded the Soviet Union in June of 1941. German forces moved easily through the giant country. They inflicted heavy casualties on Soviet troops. Then Hitler made a huge mistake. Hitler made a huge mistake. This is a big part of this. So he decided not to concentrate all of his forces against Moscow. Instead, he reinforced his armies heading north toward Leningrad and south toward the Crimean Peninsula. The Germans tried to capture Leningrad from September 1941 to January 1944. About 1 million civilians died, many from starvation, but the city never fell to the Germans. The German troops approached Moscow in December of 1941. They ran into the harshest Russian winter in decades. Many German soldiers suffered frostbite. German tanks and weapons broke down in the cold. The Nazi advance had ground to a halt, and Soviet forces drove the Germans back. So that was our last question there. So I'll wrap this up. But if you have any questions, feel free to email me or ask me. I hope you have a great day. Bye.